Good morning and welcome to TechCentral, the TCS Plus show brought to you by me, James Erasmus. And thank you very, very much, Anna Collard, for joining us again in studio. Anna Collard is a Senior Vice President and a Content Strategist and Evangelist at KnowBe4 Africa. It's not her first time in studio with us. And thank you very, very much for offering to come and chat to us very specifically about the importance of online scams and what's going on in society, but especially in the corporate environment that we all need to be aware of because we're so susceptible to it. Thank you, Anna.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here.
What I love most about our conversations is sort of how informal and relaxed they are, because what we're talking about isn't trying to sell a position or a product, but it really is to create an awareness. And we've talked before about things like mindfulness. We talked before about other aspects of cybersecurity, but today, quite specifically, I'd love to talk about some of the influences and the effects of some of the scams that are out there. There are different types of scams, naturally, but what are some of the influences they have, and understanding the threat of those scams, and then understanding what the perspective might be from the victim's angle.
Yeah, thanks, James. So we've run. Well, we do this actually a couple of times in a year. We run these little polls or surveys across either our enterprise environment, like our customers in the corporate world, but then also we like to hear what the consumers or the actual people on the ground, what their experience is. So we've just recently ran a survey across 800 consumers. So those are people that are employed all over Africa. Well, I think it's 7 countries: South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Mauritius,
Morocco.
Yeah, it's always the same one. So it's the usual economies that we deal with, or the countries that we sort of operate in. And obviously 800 people from these regions, that's not really representative. So this is not a scientific study, but it does give us an insight into at least like a little bit of a trend, like a snippet of what's going on. And what I found quite interesting with this survey, we looked at, what types of scams do people experience? If they fell victim to a scam, what was their the position, like what were they doing, and then also what the impact was, not just from a financial point of view, but from a psychological or well-being point of view. So that's the first that we've sort of gone into this topic, and I think we should do that more because, we constantly hear about data breaches, and people are so used to having their credit card details stolen, etc., that we forget that, yes, it might be easy to get that credit card back from the bank, and maybe you get your money back, and not in all cases, but in most cases when it's like a consumer type credit card fraud, you do get your money back. But what we do forget is, what does it mean to people that fall victim to these types of scams or other scams, beyond the monetary impact, like the nuisances, maybe the shame around it, feeling a bit sort of caught out. So that's what we wanted to do with this report, like really dig into it and see what people are actually feeling, and how long do these feelings linger as well.
Thanks, and I've read that report, and it's fascinating to see some of the stats, and I encourage our listeners to dive into it. It'll be shared straight after this podcast, both on our website, but also by the YouTube links and others, because very often the reason why people have become involved in a scam is because of perhaps a lack of awareness, a lack of training. Also, we're all guilty of assuming it's not going to happen to me. It only ever happens to other people, until we are the other people. And I made some notes just in reading that report to say that some of the emotional behaviors that result in people clicking on a scam or engaging in a scam or being caught by one are, not only greed and curiosity, but sometimes also fear. And there are a few others. One was a need for urgency, another one was a need for appearing to be helpful. But greed, curiosity, and fear were 3 very emotional ways of which you may outline why someone might or might not be involved in a scam, which in turn means that when they are subjected to that and they are punitively, inconvenienced, whether it's monetary or other, there's a massive psychological impact on that. And I'd love to hear more about those emotional impacts that you've gleaned from your research.
Yeah, and I mean, greed and fear are one of the most common emotions that social engineers or human hackers are trying to trigger. And they do that through sending us messages that either sort of, for example, impersonate a person of authority. So immediately when you get an email from your CEO, like, and it's a low grade form of fear. So they're not trying to scare the living daylights out of us, but it's a low grade form of fear that just, raises your heart rate. And it, again, like their main objective is to achieve something that's called an amygdala hijack. And what that means is that as soon as we feel that emotion, whether it can be also positive, but fear is like a really dominant one that just works so well. Where, as soon as we feel that emotion and anxiety, then what happens is that the way we've been built is that our system or our brain structure literally cuts off our prefrontal cortex, so the more critical thinking part, the executive functioning, and we end up reverting, doing things that are very much instinctive and not necessarily in our best favor. Yes, it worked back in the day when we had to run away from the tiger to, act instinctively. But nowadays, these tigers are hidden in emails, and we should not just click on it or react instinctively. And I guess the danger with these kind of emotion-driven attacks, which most of these social engineering attacks work around that. It might be fear. It might also be, as you mentioned, like curiosity. They may also appeal to our charitable, empathy. So anything that triggers an emotion. By the way, a very popular one that the North Korean hacking groups are using. They actually have a campaign called, Operation Dream Job. So they will use LinkedIn and social media to contact you and make you sound like you're amazing, and there's this incredible job offer or opportunity within your space. So it's very sort of well researched and specific and relevant, and that makes you be more likely, because our ego gets stroked, right? The flattery is another emotion that they use, and then obviously curiosity, and then the greed part of wanting to investigate that potential job. And that's a very successful method that these guys are using to get into particularly privileged accounts, like administrators, IT managers, etc. People that have quite a lot of power in organizations is who they are after, because obviously once they get onto those people's accounts, they can then do a lot more damage. But yeah, the report that we looked at was more on consumer side, and as you mentioned there as well, so obviously emotions are being triggered, and the people that fell for the scams, interestingly enough, again, which is in line with a lot of the other research that we've done, or that other reports that other people have done, is that in about half the cases, people were distracted or multitasking when they ended up clicking. So that's another vulnerability that we have. You don't think properly. You're like, doing a million things. And I'm sure I shared the story with you before. That's what happened to me as well. And I've been trained. That's all I've been doing for the last 20 years is, learn about social engineering and talk about it. So I should really know better. But I can also get caught out when I'm multitasking and not paying attention, and then get triggered. In my case, it was like a low grade form of fear by using this typical, we'll deactivate your account if you don't click immediately, right? So that's the distraction, multitasking weakness that we have, unfortunately, provides this perfect, attack surface for the bad guys to abuse.
And long gone are the days of seeing quite transparently that someone who's trying to hack or scam you has spelling mistakes or a dodgy email address or it's very evidently a lure. They are so intelligent, they're so manipulative, and they're using all sorts of emotional hijacking, I think you refer to it as, and the amygdala hijacking to create a rapport with their target. And that's quite scary, because I think a lot of the times that rapport is closely linked to, as you said, job satisfaction, the workplace, financial implication, banks. Now, there's a massive threat out there, and I think that unless we take a pause and consider the impact of these threats, we're going to fall foul to it. And I think the report indicates that nearly 50% of the people responded had actually been subjected to a financial scam of sorts.
Yeah, so obviously those are the more consumer level scams that we ask people to respond to. But yes, the top three are all related to either sort of trying to steal your financial information, get into your banking details, or roping you into a sort of fake investment scam or crypto NFT scam, very popular across Africa. So that's been quite interesting to see how many people actually did, or at least our respondents admitted to falling for these types of scams. So that's quite ripe, particularly with social media. And look, it depends which country, interesting enough. Like in Nigeria, social media is the number one channel that these scams sort of get distributed, or that people fall for it. And then in South Africa, it's still more email. So it's also interesting to look at the difference by country. But yeah, so they try and get us obviously where we hang out on our social media networks, whether that's LinkedIn or, and then also even on Telegram or WhatsApp groups where you receive these, I've also received some of these fake investment opportunities. And like obviously, I know this sounds so like cliche, but if it sounds too good to be true, it won't be true. But again, if you're distracted, it's just like, sounds amazing. You've heard it from maybe a friend or, and by the way, particularly in this crypto space, they often do use either fake celebrity accounts or rope in celebrities to peddle their NFT scams or their crypto scams. So you might believe this because somebody famous tweeted about it or talks about it publicly. Meanwhile, it's just either a fake or I think it was Kim Kardashian. She had to pay a penalty because she was part of, probably not maliciously, she just probably didn't know better, but she was peddling some NFT scam. And if you have, I don't know how many million followers she has, but if you have that power, then it's dangerous because you believe, right? You think, okay, well, I believe her. She's a public figure. So must be legit. And unfortunately, no, like you can't believe what's on social media.
So your point about legitimacy is we as humans want to trust. We want to, create a rapport with people who connect with us, and we expect the best. So in order to protect ourselves from ourselves, we need to work our ways in which we can arm ourselves, defend ourselves, but also just be mindful always of the fact that there's a security cross-check that one needs to do before launching into sharing one's details or clicking on a link. And I know I'm stating the obvious, but sometimes, and I even know that your report talks about the number of respondents who actually were not aware of what scams were.
Yeah.
They learn what the different types of scams.
And unfortunately, that's sometimes the best outcome actually is when you do fall or you nearly get caught out by something, then you are very much aware, like that's the only positive outcome really that also the respondents sort of said is that, well, at least they're more aware of it and they tell their friends and family about it. But obviously you would want to have that awareness before it happens. Something that also just reminded me, because you mentioned rapport, and this has just been in the press like yesterday or the day before about the MGM Group, which is like one of the biggest casinos in Las Vegas. And
tell us.
So that's like a massive hotel casino group, I think like the biggest one in Las Vegas. And they fell victim to a ransomware attack where the attackers, all they needed to do was a 10-minute phone call with someone on the inside to rope them into I don't know, like, sharing details or getting onto the environment. And what is so ironic about that is that I've actually just been in Vegas at Black Hat DEF CON, and they have this, what's called the social engineering village, where you learn, these aspiring hackers or security professionals as well. You learn how to use techniques such as rapport building, empathy, over the phone to get your victims to do what you want them to do. So you literally, and was for me, that was the best part of the whole conference, is you go into this room and then you have these competitions of social engineers that sit in a phone booth, and you can hear what they say and what the victim is responding to. And they literally use, these kind of, they call it pretext, like these stories that, hey, I'm calling from IT and I just need to verify a few details. And like, where are you based? What's the weather there? And, oh, no, I'm there and there. And it's just this human kind of rapport building and appealing to their empathy. And people are just so nice and naive, unfortunately. And you can't blame them, because that's in our human nature. We want to connect with others. And unfortunately, these guys abuse that. So it's, in a way, and it's not a nice thing, but we have to become more radically impolite and unfortunately not trust anything, even if it sounds like it's the nicest person on the other line. You gotta have that pause and first think, well, you know what, before I share this, or if they're pretending, particularly if they're pretending to be from your bank or whatever, to say, well, you know what, I'm going to call you back, and then obviously you call them back on the number that you have, not what they give you. And sort of, that's also a big takeaway, I guess, is that these scams do not only happen via email. They often come in a combination of phone calls with an email, or someone tricking you over the phone to go to a specific website, etc. And that's a very popular form of, and successful form, as we've seen.
And a clever example of that, which I read about recently, was an employee received a phone call from a voice recording or a copy of their CEO's voice, and it was a very brief phone call to say, "I'm traveling, I can't chat. It's a bad line. I'm going to send you an email. I need you to transfer some money."
Yep,
and
that's a typical.
You can guess what happened.
That's called a business email compromise, or a sort of impersonation scam. And unfortunately nowadays, these guys have access to the same automation tools or generative AI tools that you can use to create these what's called deepfake versions. Like, I just need a few seconds of your voice, James, and then I can recreate your voice and make it say whatever I want to, and that's the scary part, because yes, if you receive an email from your CEO, maybe you have enough awareness or situational awareness in that moment to say, let me double check. But if you receive a phone call, and if that, like at the moment it's maybe still only a voice note, but the way generative AI is going is that you have these real life interactions where the bots will react to what you say, or the person on the other line will react to what I'm saying in your voice. So that's really scary, because then it really sounds like the person you're talking to is the person that they're making it out to be. So again, like anything that requests you to hand over information or give, particularly like financial details, it may look like the right deal, it may sound like the right deal. Just put that 6 seconds of breathing, that pause in, to sort of slow yourself down to make sure you don't act on an emotion, and then verify, like, call back out of band communication or something, particularly if it's something related to payments.
And as an evangelist and someone who spends as much time as you do training and guiding people on this topic, it's also our responsibility when we are exposed to a potential threat to have those water cooler conversations and to reach out to our colleagues and friends and warn them of the pitfalls. Show them what you experienced and let them learn from potentially, and hopefully not, your own mistakes, but your own experiences that you've managed to avoid. So I think there's a large part of us all being so remote and distracted from each other, where we don't find the time to share. And we talked about time a few instances in this conversation, and part of that time that I refer to is pausing and being more mindful about what's out there.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And you don't even have to fall victim first to share the stories. You may just come across something that you read and you just share it with your friends and family. I'm sure I've used this example before of my mother-in-law, who by now I've made them so paranoid that they always call before they act on anything. And I love it because, and she used that, she had someone calling pretending to be from the bank that she's with. And because of all these data breaches, these bad guys have a lot of personal information about us already, right? So when they call you and they tell you, hey, that's your ID number, your address, your bank account details, I just need to get you to verify something quickly by sharing the OTP that I'm going to send you. It sounds very legit. And she said, Anna, like they had the right accent, they sounded like they were really from Stellenbosch or whatever, and they knew all of this about me, but I didn't do it. I'm like, that's so good. And please tell everybody else about that too. So yeah, definitely I agree. We have to spread the message and remind ourselves too, because that's the other thing is that you might be aware today or mindful, but then tomorrow life happens and we forget. So it's important to keep it top of mind. And so what I was saying is that the mindfulness technique is not just in my view, it's not just a technique to keep us more vigilant, to not fall for scams, but it's also a technique that helps us to just be saner or happier in general in these digital spaces, because we can get manipulated, yes, by scammers, but also by maybe just advertisers, and then end up people on social media that may trigger us, and then we comment or we purchase things we don't need. So there's so many use cases where being more mindful and bringing that pause and using your emotions in a way as a warning signal rather than an impulse to do something. So what I'm always saying is, like, if you feel anything, and that could also be in your physical senses, if your heart races or you feel just different to your baseline, that could be a sign that you're actually being manipulated or persuaded or tricked into doing something that's not necessarily in your best interest. Whether that's buying stuff you don't need on Instagram, like I sometimes do, or clicking on something malicious, or falling for a scam, in all these cases.
Yeah, and we should trust our instincts. At the end of the day, we are animals at heart. You don't walk in the wild without looking left and right and behind you, actually.
Yes, although, our instincts are also what sometimes make us do stupid things. So 100% agree that we should, your intuition is something you should listen to more closely. But sometimes the instinct is what makes you click because you're getting triggered by fear, right? So what I'm saying is, like, just add that pause. So before you feel something and then you think you have to act on it immediately. Like, I'm scared, I need to click. That will be the instinctive reaction. But rather remember that, hey, because I'm feeling something, I remember that could be a sign of being manipulated. So instead of reacting quickly, let me just take 6 seconds, all it takes, right? Just 6 seconds of pausing. Like take a deep breath and a longer exhale. The longer the exhale, the more you calm yourself down. And then decide, okay, am I really that scared? Do I need to click on that? Or can I not verify it? Yeah.
A point well made, that intuition.
Yes.
And I know that the listeners are very much looking forward to reading this report, and there are lots of statistics in there, and it's definitely worth sharing from a consumer but also a commercial perspective, so that we have that element of awareness. And we're honored to have you from KnowBe4 Africa back in studio today. KnowBe4 Africa are an incredible organization that actually the world's largest integrated security awareness training and simulated phishing platform. And as part of KnowBe4 Africa, I'm going to quickly just make sure, if our listeners don't already know, how proud KnowBe4 are of you, who, whilst in Las Vegas, was given a very prestigious award, Women of Cybersecurity 2023. Well done, Anna, from us at TechCentral.
Oh, thank you, James. Yeah, it was quite unexpected, but it felt good. Thank you.
You're very modest, and I know that our listeners and those that are listening who know you will already know about this award and be able to read more about it online. And I think that it certainly gives credibility to everything you do and say. So we at TechCentral are very proud to be associated with KnowBe4 Africa and Anna Collard. Thank you very much for joining us in studio today.
Thanks so much, James. Thanks, everyone.
Lovely to chat. Thanks, Anna.